This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Baruch Haba, welcome everyone. We continue in the Iggeres, HaMussar of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, and Rabbi Yisrael now unleashes his ultimate weapon. Despite the fact that the whole objective of this letter is to learn Mussar, Nevertheless, despite the fact that the whole objective of this letter is to learn Mussar, Rabbi Yisrael now unleashes his ultimate weapon, and that is the most powerful arsenal against the Yetzer Hara. As we've learned, that it seems like Mussar is not enough, because in the heat of the moment, if a person has a habit to do certain chatoim, you're not going to overcome it just because you were inspired a few times about the inyan. You need to develop a habit not to do it. It needs to be, so to speak, second nature to you. The same way you don't eat chazer treif, you don't do certain isurim. And says Rabbi Yisrael, he said the general weapon is learning Torah. More specific, to learn the subject that you're having difficulty with. Says Rabbi Yisrael, v'zois halo yadua, and this it is known. Ki hishtanos hateva, the change of one's nature, toiled will only come rak milimod v'hergal rab, only from learning and great habit. In other words, one will only be able to change their nature if they learn the subject and they develop new routines. V'chein hayisoid ha'ikari, the main principle, v'ha'amod hanachin, and the steadfast pillar, lahachin es atzmai, to prepare oneself, l'shmira meha averos, to guard yourself from sin, v'asiyas hamitzvos, hurak halimud harav b'halacha zu, is only a lot of learning in that halacha, hanoigas la'avero zu, that is relevant to that avera, or mitzvah zu, or for that mitzvah. Says Rav Goldberg, the fact that we mentioned this yesterday, that we see many Talmid Chachamim, they could learn Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, and they're not careful in those inyanim, it's because they don't learn it bekavana, that it should come lidei ma'isa. Says Rabbi Yisrael, uvifrat be'iyon hadeg heitev, especially if you learn it very much in depth. In other words, learning Bekios will not really impact a person and change a person in terms of being able to overcome averos that are habitual. It's very nice. A person will be rewarded for any limud Torah. But the real limud that will change a person is in depth. This kind of learning will make a strong ownership in your soul, lios ha'avera, meruchakas menu b'teva, for the sin to be distant from a person by nature. Rav Goldberg brings down that the Brisker Rav said he once heard from Rabbi Nachum Zemba that 100 inspirational talks will not bring a person to greater observance of Shabbos that one in-depth learning of Hilchos Shabbos will bring. In other words, better to learn a Sif in Shulchan Aruch with the Mishnah Bruras and analyze it and learn it in depth than to hear 100 inspirational talks about it. The Rav Goldberg brings down a story about Rav Simcha Zissel that before his Petira, they put some kind of fan over his head to cool him off because he was sort of approaching the stage of Gesisa, and there was not much vitality left in Rav Simcha Zissel. And what happened was, Reb Simcha Zissel somehow, he snapped out of his almost unconscious state, and he removed the fan from off of his head, so that the fan would not break. Now how is that possible? He was literally closer to the next world than he was to this world. He couldn't talk, he couldn't communicate, he almost couldn't think, but it was instinctive in him not to cause damage to another person. that did not require thought. It became instinctive, and that's the way that one can overcome sin, where they learn something in depth, where it becomes instinctive. Says Rabbi Yisrael, Kedoima b'machazosenu elu. A similar example of this phenomenon. Tehillah lakel, thank God. Yisurei nevelos u'treifos v'dumeim, eating a nevela and a treifa or the like. Mutba'im b'nefesh ha-Yisraeli is ingrained in the Jewish heart. Ada shelo yitztarech shum ish le'esoif tivai v'tavasa l'srachik mehem. That no person needs to bridle his nature to distance from. Most people, right, if I were to tell you, check out this really delicious lobster, or would you like this fried and sauteed clam? You say, get out of here, I'm not interested. It's not a taiva. Kihem aloi lazar, it's disgusting to a person. Haloi lo yalech chalila alev shum adam me'cher basar kosher. It would never enter anyone's heart, any butcher, lehisrapois milidrosh itza amar tzedek, from saying, yeah, I don't really have to ask a shaila whether this is kosher or not, b'matzah shum davar sheish b'chashash treifos. Normally, if somebody sells meat and there's a concern there might be a treifa, nobody would refrain from showing it to a rav, be'ivarim hapnimiyim, if there's a chash treifa on the inner organs. Im heyoyse lefam b'inyizev simruba, despite the fact that a person might incur a great loss, ve'en yodua b'is loss, and he's the only one who knows about it. Moira shamayim alav b'tiva, a person has a certain natural fear of sin, b'hergeloi, and habit, Chalilaloi meirasha li kashal as Yisrael. Heaven forbid from this wickedness to cause a Jew to stumble. V'ulam, however, b'amnaseinu harabim, in our many sins, b'masa umatan, when it comes to business, hu behepach, as frum as we are when it comes to eating meat, and if you're a butcher from not being machshel somebody, that's how uncareful most people are in business affairs. He says, umatan hu behepach, when it comes to business, the opposite. Roiv b'nei adam lo yiru shachshash gadzvoy shmei atzmam. Most people will never go over to a Rav. Rav, I might have $273 in my pocket that might belong to Ruvain. Should I give it back to him? I don't think any Rav ever got that question. Certainly it's not a frequent question. I guarantee more Rabbanim get questions about Shreifos and Basar or Basar B'chalav questions than questions, I think I might have too much money, should I give it back to my friend? Terem Yisbe'enu Chaveroi. Yeah, if they take you to Bezdin, then you'll decide whether you want to go or not. There are many people, even after you go to Bezdin, they'll come up with some kind of conniving, deceitful plan to get out of it, or they'll just brazenly deny it. What's the difference between stealing and eating a treifa? It's all the same. They're both lavim. In accordance with the Torah. Ubasar basar the treifa lo yiseichelu, lo yiseichel kol nevela, or lo yisashek es reyachav, lo yisigzov damim. There's no difference between don't eat a nevela, don't eat a treifa, don't oppress your friend monetarily, and don't steal. Just like to a Jew, there's no difference between whether it's missing a heart or missing a lung or missing a liver. They're all the same. Once the pasuk says it's a treifa, you distance yourself. And you follow the statutes of the Torah. It should be the same thing monetarily. Whatever, according biblically, belongs to your friend. Have a gezel, it's robbery. We see in our many sins, afilu haloimdim, even people who learn uchamat gam yireim, and even God-fearing people, they're not as careful when it comes to stealing as they are when it comes to kashrus. Einam nizharim kiyos, they are not properly careful. Beloisa se halazu, when it comes to this lav, asher yoima kippurim v'gava misa einam achaprim olah. Stealing is much more chamer than treifa. Treifa is not so chamer. All right. You ate a pig. Nishka ferlach. So you go to Gehenna. and they'll put the guy in a self-cleaning oven, and after a few months he'll come out and he's as good as new. But if somebody steals, there's no kapara, not in this world, not in the next world. There's no kapara. So of course stealing is more chamor. And yet, so says Rabbi Yisrael, because a person does not have that natural distaste for robbery, the only eitzah is to learn the halachos of kosher mishpat in depth, and that will cause a deep internal response to stay away from these things. Okay, Marv Rabbi, have a great day, and as Shem.
I have a question. Isn't there a kapara, but he has to come back with the other person and return the money in the Gilgal?
Or could he do teshuva or give tzedakah?
No.
Tzedakah doesn't know. We've heard from Rav Shaft and Rav Binavin many times, stories there where
Yeah, but
you have to come back.
okay, stories are stories, and Rabbi Yisrael does not deal with the Teres HaGilgal, not mentioned in his writing. As Rav Miller says, he never heard his Rabbeim discuss. I'm not saying I don't talk about it, but it's extra legal measures. Otherwise there's no kapara. Okay, Rabbi say, have a good one. Kol tov.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.